In the next few minutes, you're about to uncover some of the most chilling, eye-opening, and ultimately freeing knowledge ever derived from human suffering. This is no ordinary history lesson. It's a deep dive into the female psyche, dissected not in a quiet lab, but in the brutal cold of the Soviet gulags, where the extreme hardships of starvation, betrayal, and isolation acted as a cruel acid, stripping away the surface level of human behavior to reveal raw truths about loyalty and betrayal. The men who endured the nightmare of these camps came back with a horrifying discovery. They saw a consistent pattern of behavior in women that, frankly, shatters the fairy tales we've been sold about love and loyalty. It's what we call the Solzhenitsyn secret. Understanding it isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a shield, a form of armor against the silent emotional gulag that is modern relationships. For centuries, philosophers have debated women, love, and loyalty, but they did it from the comfort of libraries, with pens and paper, in sunlit courtyards. Their theories were elegant, but ultimately they were useless in the face of raw, real-life struggles and the harsh realities of survival. They observed life from a safe distance, but the real laboratory, the one we're about to explore, was built in the frozen hell of the Soviet camps, and the test subjects, the millions of men condemned for a single word, a look, or even just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. These men were stripped from their families and thrown into the machine of death, and the main variable in this experiment, the one they focused on, was the women they left behind, their wives, lovers, and mothers, those who kept their memories alive. These women, once the anchors to their past lives, were put to the ultimate test, and what these men learned through unimaginable suffering was a disturbing truth about the female psyche when pushed to its limits. They mapped out the precise contours of conditional love and revealed the shocking biological imperatives that could override a lifetime of affection in the blink of an eye. This wasn't just a theory, it was knowledge earned with blood, broken hearts, and the pain of the human spirit. The great Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who chronicled this agony in his works, like the Gulag Archipelago, and One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, didn't just capture the brutality of the Soviet system. He also documented a key sociological experiment, the way women responded when the world they knew collapsed. He recorded the letters that never arrived, the divorce papers that did, the whispers exchanged in the cold barracks long after lights went out. What he gave us were the raw data points. Our task now is to dissect this data, push past the shock, and extract the brutal, timeless principles that govern loyalty and betrayal. But here's the thing, this isn't about hating women. This isn't about misogyny. It's about recognizing patterns on a grand historical scale. It's about understanding the mechanics of human nature so you're never blindsided by them. The reward for understanding these truths is freedom, cold, clear-eyed freedom. It's the ability to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it would be. It's the end of naive hopes and the beginning of sovereign strength. Let's transport ourselves to a specific moment, a case study embedded in the collective memory of the archipelago. Picture a man, let's call him Yevgeny, a bright young engineer from Leningrad. His crime, being too talented, too promising, a potential rival to a petty party official. One fateful night, the knock on the door came. His world shrank to the size of a cramped black van. His only comfort, his anchor to sanity, was the image of his wife, Anna. The way she would wave at him from their apartment window. He's arrested, sentenced to 10 years of forced labor for a crime as ridiculous as espionage, a charge that's laughable, yet deadly. Weeks go by as he's shipped north to a camp beyond the Arctic Circle. His existence now boils down to one thing: survival, the only thing that keeps him going. Bread and hope, the hope embodied by Anna. Every letter he writes, every scrap of paper he can get his hands on, is filled with promises of his innocence, his strength, and his belief that he'll return. He waits desperately for a reply, for any sign that he still exists to the world outside. Months pass, nothing. His mind, weakened by hunger and the cold, starts to spiral. What if she's dead? What if she's in prison too? This uncertainty gnaws at him like poison. Then, after 14 months, a letter arrives. It's not the thick, heartfelt packet he hoped for. It's thin. His hands, now trembling and frostbitten, tear it open. It's not from Anna. It's from the Soviet court in Leningrad, confirming his divorce. The letter reads, "Yevgeny, forgive me. This is too difficult. I have to think of my life. Do not try to contact me again. I have remarried." The shock isn't just emotionally, it's physical. It's like a boot to the chest. He's not just devastated, he's suffocated. The air leaves his lungs. His world, already gray from hunger and isolation, goes completely black. The last pillar of his resistance crumbles. That night, he does not eat his bread ration. He gives it away. He stares at the ceiling of his barracks, the will to fight evaporating. The betrayal has crushed him not with the bullet of a guard, but with the cold sting of ink on paper. His body will last for a while longer, but the fight is over soon. He succumbs to a minor illness and pneumonia that would have been shrugged off by stronger men. This story is far from unique. Solzhenitsyn documented thousands of Yevgenys. As he wrote, the wife of a prisoner had to make an immediate choice, either renounce her husband or resign herself to ruin. And how many could make that sacrifice? 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. This is the first law of the Solzhenitsyn secret. The likelihood of abandonment is inversely proportional to the social and material cost of loyalty. Love isn't infinite. It's a currency, and when that currency loses its value, most women will liquidate their investment. But why? Is it cruel? Weakness? Solzhenitsyn and the sociologists who studied this phenomenon believe there's something deeper at play. Women, by nature, are the conduits of life. Their primary evolutionary goal is survival and the provision for offspring. They are hypergamous by design, meaning they instinctively seek the best available protector and provider. A man's value is intrinsically tied to his social standing, his wealth, and his ability to project strength and security. In a single stroke, the state stripped Yevgeny of all these things. He was no longer a brilliant engineer or a provider. He was a convict, a social outcast, a non-person. To be seen with him meant ruin, both for her and any potential children they might have had. His worth, once defined by his potential, was now nullified. And in that moment, Anna's love, though it may have once been genuine, was exposed for what it truly was: conditional. The abandonment wasn't driven by malice. Often, it was an act of harsh, evolutionary self-preservation. She wasn't betraying him, she was saving herself. Understanding this cold, biological calculation is the first step toward removing the emotional sting of betrayal. You aren't being discarded because of who you are. You're being discarded for what you've become more. In Yevgeny's case, what you've stopped being. Your value in the marketplace of survival has vanished. But there's a twist. Not all women responded the same way. Some stayed loyal. Some fought back against the odds. Solzhenitsyn documented these women, calling them Zek wives or Decemberists' wives, a reference to the women who followed their exiled husbands after a failed rebellion in 1825. These were women who didn't just remain loyal, they fought fiercely for their husbands' survival. They renounced their comfortable lives, took on the bureaucratic nightmare of dealing with Soviet officials, and even moved to remote camps just to be closer to their men. They became experts in survival, writing endless appeals, standing in lines for days just to deliver a few potatoes or a piece of sausage that could mean the difference between life and death. These women were rare, but they existed, and their loyalty wasn't passive, was an active resistance, a refusal to bow to the forces that sought to destroy their husbands and families. Solzhenitsyn's own first wife, Natalia Rosoya, was a prime example. She stood by him in the beginning, but the pressures eventually drove her to divorce him. Yet, when he was released in 1953, she sought him out again. It wasn't a perfect loyalty, but it was a complex, deeply human story of fluctuating strength, betrayal, and eventual reconciliation. So, what made a woman like Natalia different from someone like Anna? What made her a Decemberist's wife instead of just another tragic figure like Anna? Solzhenitsyn suggested it was a mix of personal strength, a deep, almost spiritual understanding of love, and often a certain ideological fervor that made these women immune to social pressures. They saw their husbands not as criminals, but as men of unbreakable character, men whose worth transcended their circumstances. This is the second law of the Solzhenitsyn secret. Unconditional loyalty is a historical anomaly found only in a tiny fraction of women with extreme independence and ideological strength. This isn't something you can expect. It's something you can recognize. And if you're fortunate enough to encounter it, you should cherish it with immense gratitude. But don't bet your emotional survival on finding a woman like that. The odds are catastrophically stacked against you. This isn't some story from the distant past. The Gulag is just the most concentrated example of a truth that plays out every day in the world around us. The conditions may be softer now, slower, more insidious, but they're still the same. A man loses his job. A man falls into depression. A man gets sick and loses his vitality. A man simply stops leading, loses his sense of purpose, or can't maintain the frame that once commanded respect. These aren't the cold Siberian winds, but they still hit with the same force. And when that happens, the woman who once loved him, who once supported him, begins to pull away. It's subtle at first, just a few unspoken words, a lack of interest, maybe some passive-aggressive comments. Then, as the man continues to decline, the withdrawal becomes more apparent. The affectionate touch becomes fewer, the smiles less frequent, the long conversations replaced by short, uninterested responses. Eventually, there might be the talk, the one where she says, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." This is the modern equivalent of the divorce papers from Anna. The methods are different, but the underlying principle is the same. The biological imperative that drove Anna's decision to abandon Yevgeny's survival, security, and status still operates today. The marketplace of love, where men and women trade in their emotions and affection, operates on the same laws, just in more comfortable, less extreme circumstances. But the betrayal, when it happens, feels just as final. It feels just as complete. You feel just as crushed. And that's why understanding the Solzhenitsyn secret is so critical. It gives you the framework to see the betrayal coming before it hits. It allows you to analyze the conditions of your own relationship, not through the lens of hope and wishful thinking, but with the cold, calculating eye of someone studying human nature as a historian studying a recurring pattern. When a man is betrayed, whether through an affair, divorce, or the subtle withdrawal of affection, it's a blow to his self-worth. It's a gut punch that leaves him questioning everything. But the real power comes not from wallowing in the pain of betrayal, but in reframing it. The survivors of the Gulag didn't let the betrayal defeat them. They used it as fuel to build themselves into something stronger. The question isn't, why did she do this to me? But what does this reveal to me about the world, about myself? In the Gulag, the men who survived didn't let the betrayal of a woman or the system break them. Instead, they found ways to turn that suffering into power. They understood that, while external validation could be taken away, their internal strength and sense of purpose could never be stripped from them unless they allowed it. They learned that their value wasn't tied to the approval of others, and certainly not to the loyalty of a woman. The survivors understood something deep and essential about masculinity. Your worth cannot be given to you. It cannot be taken away. It must be forged in the fires of your own suffering. And the moment they accepted that, the moment they stopped waiting for validation from the outside world, they became untouchable. Nothing, no betrayal, no pain, no hardship, break them. They had found a strength so deep, so unshakable, that nothing could move them from their course. The key to this transformation lies in how these men reframed their suffering. They didn't see themselves as victims. They saw their suffering as a crucible, a process of forging something unbreakable within themselves. The pain they endured, the betrayals they suffered, weren't there to destroy them. They were there to mold them, to strip away the weak parts of their soul and leave only the strongest, most resilient version of themselves. One of the most powerful tools these men used was the ability to focus on the present moment. In the Gulag, the future was uncertain. Survival was never guaranteed. But rather than dwelling on the uncertainty or the pain of the past, the survivors focused on the immediate moment. They focused on getting through the next hour, the next minute, the next breath. This hyper-focus on the present became their lifeline. It gave them the power to endure the unendurable. The modern man can learn a lot from this mindset. When a man is struggling in a relationship, when he's feeling the sting of betrayal, it's easy to let that overwhelm him. He thinks about the future, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the uncertainty. But that's where the danger lies. When a man focuses on the things he can't control, he surrenders his power. The key is to focus on what he can control. The next minute, the next action, the next word, the next breath. This is where the sovereignty of the modern man begins. Take a moment to think about your own life. When something goes wrong, when you face betrayal, loss, or hardship, what's your natural response? Do you spiral into despair? Do you look for someone else to validate your worth? Or do you focus on the present moment, on the things you can control, on the actions you can take to move forward? The men who survived the Gulag didn't just survive physically, they survived psychologically. They found ways to impose order on chaos, to find purpose even in the most meaningless, painful circumstances. They knew that the true power lay in their ability to shape their internal world, to create a fortress within themselves that nothing could breach. This internal fortress was built through small, deliberate acts of discipline. In the camps, after a 12-hour day of brutal labor in sub-zero temperatures, the survivors would pick the lice from their clothes. It wasn't because it would make a difference. It wouldn't. The lice would come back in a matter of hours. But it was an act of defiance. It was a declaration. You may own my body, but my mind is my own. The modern man can take a page from this book. It's not about the external world, what's happening in the world, what others think of you, or whether your partner is being loyal. It's about the rituals you build into your life that assert your control over yourself. Whether it's hitting the gym when you're tired, reading a challenging book instead of scrolling on your phone, or simply making your bed with precision. Every morning, these small acts of discipline are your lice-picking rituals. They are your way of declaring sovereignty over your own mind and body. Each act is a tiny affirmation that you are the master of yourself, that no external event, no betrayal, no hardship can define you. You are the one who shapes your life. As these men in the Gulag understood, when external validation is stripped away, what remains is the most powerful force on earth, your sense of purpose. And for the survivor, that purpose was not tied to a woman, or even to the hope of ever leaving the camp. Their purpose became something far greater, the preservation of their inner integrity, the protection of their own soul. For some, this new purpose was to bear witness to the atrocities they had endured, committed to documenting their suffering so future generations could understand the true horrors of the Gulag system. Himself did this. While still a prisoner, he began to compose what would later become the Gulag Archipelago. Using matchsticks, he would memorize long passages to preserve the story, all while enduring the most brutal conditions. His purpose was not just survival. It was to expose a truth so profound that it could change the course of history. His suffering was now part of something much larger than himself. This is the essence of the survivor's mindset. You see, in the Gulag, the men who endured weren't just surviving, they were learning. Every moment of suffering, every betrayal, every ounce of pain was an opportunity to refine their inner strength, their clarity, and their purpose. They saw their suffering not as something to break them, but as fuel for their greater mission. The modern man can adopt this same mentality. The world may not be as overtly brutal as the Gulag, but it's full of subtle forms of adversity. The pressures of life, the daily grind, personal struggles, and the inevitable betrayals in relationships. These things can weigh heavily on a man. But the survivor's mindset teaches us that our struggles are not meaningless. They are lessons, opportunities to grow stronger, to refine our character, to become the men we're meant to be. The key is in how you approach pain. Will you let it define you, or will you use it to redefine yourself? The men who survived the Gulag made the conscious decision to never let their circumstances define them. Instead, they turned every hardship, every moment of suffering, into an opportunity to fortify their soul. They didn't wait for things to get better. They made themselves better in the process. Let's be clear. The survivor's mindset isn't about becoming emotionless or cold. It's not about rejecting love or the connections we form with others. It's about understanding that your value is not defined by the external world. It's about knowing that no matter what happens, no matter how cruel life becomes, or how much betrayal you face, you have the power to shape your own destiny. Your worth is not tied to someone else's loyalty, approval, or affection. It is something intrinsic to you, something that is built through your actions, your resilience, and your unbreakable will. When a man lives this way, when he understands that his mission is larger than any relationship, larger than any external validation, he becomes immune to the subtle betrayals of modern life. A woman can withdraw her affection, but he will not be shattered. A relationship can fall apart, but he will not lose himself. He understands that his mission is his own, and that mission is not reliant on anyone else's approval. This idea is further emphasized by the way Solzhenitsyn framed his own suffering. When he was finally released from the Gulag, he didn't return to the world as the same man who had entered. The experience had reshaped him, not only physically, but also spiritually. The suffering, the betrayal, the loss, had all been part of a process of ascension. The man who walked out of the Gulag was a man who had discovered an unshakable truth. His value was not tied to the approval of others. It was something he had forged within himself. This is the ultimate freedom, the kind of freedom that comes not from external circumstances, but from an internal transformation. The modern man can experience this same freedom by following the steps outlined in the Solzhenitsyn secret, by transferring hope away from the validation of others and into the strength of his own mission. He frees himself from the shackles of external expectations. The key to this transformation lies in purpose. A man's purpose must be something that is entirely his own. It can't be about pleasing others, or seeking approval, or depending on someone else for happiness. Your purpose should be something that exists regardless of what others think of you. It could be a craft, a career, a creative pursuit, a family, or even something as simple as personal development. But whatever it is, it must be something you are willing to give your life for, because when you find that purpose, you will realize that nothing can take it from you. In practical terms, this means creating a life that is deeply rooted in your own values, your own desires, and your own goals. It's about becoming a man who does not need external validation to feel fulfilled. When you wake up every morning, you should know that the work you're doing is meaningful to you, regardless of how others perceive it. And if a woman isn't your life, her affection and loyalty are a bonus, not a requirement. You can appreciate her love, but you won't depend on it for your sense of self-worth. The Solzhenitsyn secret isn't about rejecting relationships or love altogether. It's about understanding that your value comes from within. If you place your worth in the hands of others, you are always at risk of being hurt when those hands turn cold. But when you learn to rely on your own internal strength, your own sense of purpose, the external world becomes secondary. This shift in perspective also allows you to see relationships for what they truly are, an exchange of value. The dynamics of love and loyalty are never static. They are fluid, conditional, and often influenced by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Understanding this truth doesn't make you cynical, it makes you wise. You stop expecting people to meet all your emotional needs, and instead, you learn to meet those needs within yourself. When you understand that your value is forged through your own actions, not determined by the whims of others, you can experience love and connection without becoming emotionally dependent on them. You become a man who loves freely, without attachment or neediness, because your happiness and self-worth are no longer tied to someone else's approval. The survivors of the Gulag walked out of their hells as men who had transcended the need for external validation. They had learned the ultimate lesson that no matter what the world takes from you, the one thing they could never take away was your own integrity, your own self-respect, and your unshakable sense of purpose. This is the final lesson of the Solzhenitsyn secret. Your value is not determined by the love of others. It is forged in your actions every single day through the trials you endure and the purpose you pursue. A man who understands this truth becomes unbreakable. He becomes a force that can weather any storm, endure any hardship, and rise stronger after every betrayal. So, as you move forward in your own life, remember this: build your internal fortress. Create a mission that is yours alone, and make it so meaningful that nothing, no betrayal, no hardship, no person can break you. The world may throw all sorts of challenges your way, but if you remain steadfast in your purpose, if you build your inner strength and sovereignty, nothing can defeat you. Walk through the wire, embrace the cold, and build something that will last. Your mission awaits.